Gothic horror as a genre has been around for almost 300 years now and has been adapted into film to tell some truly ghoulish stories. Whether they feature ghosts, werewolves, vampires, or just tortured human souls, these Gothic horror features perfectly capture the grim atmosphere and the emotional terror that was so popular in the literary genre. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com and here's our list of the 10 best Gothic horror films. Number 10. Sweeney Todd. Of course, Tim Burton had to feature on this list. A career that was built on creepy, beautiful, and oddly touching stories went on to define the DVD shelf of anyone who listened to The Cure even once. And while Edward Scissorhands gave teenage goth girls the dreamboat of their dreams, Sweeney Todd is the quintessential Tim Burton Gothic horror. Sweeney Todd tells the terrible tale of a barber pushed to murder and cannibalism after going through a pretty rubbish time. Johnny Depp, Alan Rickman, and Helena Bonham Carter cope masterfully with the hugely challenging music while bringing something entirely new to the table. Despite it being far less fantastical than many of his other tales, Sweeney Todd carries that unmistakable whiff of Tim Burton charm. Corpse-like characters hang sorrowfully on every corner, and dark whimsicality paints each musical number in an oddly charming way. Oh, and it's insanely gory. Each slice of the straight razor is followed by a fantastic fountain of blood, all while everyone keeps on singing away quite happily. It is moving in equal parts, and the ending will tug at your heartstrings and roast them in a pie. And to top it all off, the Sacha Baron Cohen in a skin-tight bright blue bodysuit thing. What more could you want out of a film? Number 9. The Others. In this movie, Nicole Kidman is absolutely at her best, perfectly mixing maternal warmth and an icy chill that runs down the spine of the entire story. It's a tightly wound mystery that does not let up even for a moment to let you breathe, while also keeping a tense and steady pace. A huge creepy house choked in thick fog, creepy kids, a possible haunting, and Christopher Eccleston all come together in a deeply moving story about love, loss, and grief. The film was English spoken yet Spanish made, and as for the score, it is absolutely perfect for the story. Hugely unnerving and sets the hairs on the back of your neck standing right up, especially with the well-used and well-executed jump scares that litter the film's runtime. Rumours of a remake have been in the works, so it's only right we bring this film back into the light of day. Number 8. Eyes Without a Face. Made in 1960, this was hugely controversial for its graphic subject matter, with audiences allegedly fainting in cinemas upon its release. Despite modern audiences being far more desensitized to horrific imagery, it still certainly packs a punch. After a father is driven mad by guilt over mutilating his daughter's face in a brutal car accident, he lures young women to his lab where he tries to remove their faces in order to recover his daughter's appearance. The title focuses far more on the characters and atmosphere, opting to show very little gore or violence. What it does show, however, is exceptionally nasty. The unflinching shot of a woman's face literally being removed is unforgettable, yet the film does not let you forget the tragedy of the whole story. It's clear that Goodnight Mummy, the terrifying 2014 film, took inspiration from this nightmarish tale of how identity ties in so fundamentally with overall aesthetic appearance. The idea of losing your face and having it attached onto someone else is beyond comprehension and taps into a deeper fear of being impersonated or not being able to recognize who you are in a mirror. Not only that, but the desperate attempts of the plastic surgeon to help his daughter are oddly sympathetic, despite the depravity to which he sinks. It's beautiful, brutal, and will stay with you long after the credits have rolled. Number 7. 1931's Frankenstein. The 1931 film is one of the biggest turning points in horror movie history and has stood the test of time in the many years since its release. Based off the novel by Mary Shelley, the legacy of this story cannot be overstated. The grandmother of Goth created this story as part of a writing competition amongst her equally talented friends, Lord Byron and Percy Shelley, to see who could write the best horror story. I think it's pretty clear who won. This dreadful tale incorporates body horror, philosophy of human nature, Catholic guilt, and a creature who has accumulated more pity than hate. Pretty much the perfect ingredients to cook a delicious Gothic fry-up. The adaptation to screen brings all of these themes to gloomy, reanimated life, with still beautiful cinematography, now underused Gothic stereotypes that somehow still feel fresh when watching the film. Changes of the novel also make the monster seem even more of an unfortunate soul than before, with the ending showcasing the monster as a victim of a cruel society. Number 6. Bram Stoker's Dracula. You knew this was coming. Like Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's legendary novel is a god in the land of Gothic media. Castles on jagged mountains, eternally damned souls forced to live as undead monsters, even more Catholic guilt, and a seductive villain who oozes charm. Sounds just like a Type O negative concert. And while the 1931 version is arguably the most well-known, I'm gonna give this spot to the 1992 version. This film is the gap in sexy vampire films between The Lost Boys and Twilight, although it is far more romantic than the both of them combined. Taking a different approach to the titular vampire than other films, Gary Oldman stars as the tortured creature looking for the reincarnation of his lost love, and he is absolutely perfect for the role. Villainous without being campy, he brings a refreshing new take to the legend. Of course, he also has that pesky habit of drinking human blood and turning into wolf creatures, as you do. It's melodramatic, self-indulgent, and a bloody good time, with its fangs well and truly in Gothic horror. Coming across almost as an opera at times, it is visually stunning as well as a genuinely good movie. It doesn't shy away from the gore and violence too, which gives us something for everyone. We do have to mention Keanu Reeves' attempt at an English accent, but the less that is said about that, the better. Number 5. The Man Who Laughs. Now, by today's standards, this is not a particularly hard horror film, but the grim tone and admittedly frightening central character makes it certainly feel like one. Made in 1928, the film explores a touching and tragic love story in a similar way to Frankenstein and even Dracula to some extent. However, there is no monster, just a lonely and mistreated man. This makes us examine a different type of horror altogether, the horror of our own prejudice. Based on Victor Hugo's novel, which is unsurprisingly not the cheeriest read, the film was a German expressionism gamble from an American studio, which was initially met with very negative responses. Seen as too sad, too overblown, and overall an unpleasant experience, the film also went on to inspire one of the most infamous and compelling characters in all of fiction. He's quite niche, so you may not have heard of him. DC made a villain called the Joker, based off the imagery of the Man Who Laughs, and 2 incarnations of the character on screen have won Academy Awards for their portrayal. As I said, pretty niche though. Number 4. Crimson Peak. This film is one of the best Gothic horror films ever. It has the big creepy house, it has supernatural goings-on, tall and handsome strangers with dark secrets, repressed Victorian sexuality, beautiful cinematography, and a compelling protagonist who carries the viewer through this beautiful story. Despite its arguably very heavy-handed aesthetic, it's also very delicate, carefully weaving a mystery with shocking twists. Directed by the genius Guillermo del Toro, he builds upon fantastical elements we saw in his 2006 film Pan's Labyrinth. As always with Del Toro, the special effects are divine, with actor Doug Jones once again bringing real and tangible life to the spooks that like to follow Edith Cushing around and upset her. The downfall of this film was being marketed as only a horror film, however. As is often the case with Del Toro, it is a delicious mix of horror and fantasy. Released in the days prior to Halloween 2015, audiences expected a terrifying jump-scare-ridden ghost story and were instead greeted by something far more intelligent and endearing. That isn't to say the film isn't scary, it has some truly horrific moments, but where the film excels is being able to balance with the brooding and heavy tone that swirls around the story. Number 3. Nosferatu. Made in 1922 but not released in the US until 1927, this film still carries a momentous legacy. Inspired by Dracula but far enough away from the original story to be released without a copyright mob on its heels, the film went on to be a cultural icon. Shots of Count Orlok ascending the staircase or him just staring blankly into the camera shocked audiences back then and today. This film brought vampires back into the public eye and made them something to be terrified of. In the years since its release, the film has arguably become much more horrific, with the jumpy filming style of the 1920s feeling very alien and unsettling. The score is loud, threatening, and makes the film feel like more of an experience than just a movie. It's incredible that a film almost a century old still has this impact. Hopefully, the Robert Eggers directed remake may still come to light, but even if it doesn't, this masterpiece still captures the essence of Gothic horror. Number 2. The Woman in Black. The scariest thing about this film when it was announced was the realization of Harry Potter fans that we and Daniel Radcliffe were getting old. Then the film actually came out, and oh my god, it was so much better than anyone expected. Based off Susan Hill's novel and the award-winning stage production of the same name, this film had huge scary shoes to fill. During an era that had just shaken off torture porn and jump scares, this film was a welcoming breath of fresh air. A terrifying atmosphere-drenched breath of fresh air, at least. Following Arthur Kipps trying to unravel the mystery behind Ilmarsh House is a nail-biting, butt-clenching slow burn from start to finish. And I mean, opening a film with 3 children committing suicide is certainly one way to grab the attention of your audience. Not only is the horror there in its violence, but the gothicness of it all is ramped right up to 11. The foggy marshes and dilapidated house is the perfect setting for ghostly lurkings, and the titular woman is a terrifying force of evil who you do oddly feel sorry for. The audience is as alone as Arthur, and the film plays on this idea to absolute effect, especially when the viewer is shown the woman to be lurking in the background when Arthur doesn't even know she's there, making you feel truly isolated. This film captures the perfect elements of gothic horror and absolutely embraces them to an extent that never comes across as campy or too much. It's sad, scary, and genuinely stunning, which I think most goths would love to emulate. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share, and subscribe too. And number 1, 1963's The Haunting. It could easily be argued that most of the modern gothic horrors on this list owe pretty much everything to 1963's The Haunting. Why? Because it mixed all the best elements of gothic horror to come before and inspired new ideas that later films would go on to emulate. Truly a horror and truly gothic, Shirley Jackson's terrifying novel is transformed on screen into a delightfully spooky spine-tingler that still holds up today. While the Netflix produced show The Haunting of Hill House is brilliant and goddamn terrifying, it does fail to capture the otherworldly eeriness of the novel and 1963 adaptation. Once again, we see supernatural goings on in a big old scary house, but The Haunting uses pioneering special effects that make it feel far more modern than it has any right to. For example, gliding the camera along the banister of the twisting central staircase to make the house feel as dizzying and incomprehensible as possible is an ingenious way to disorientate the viewer. Whilst it also revolutionized movie tricks, it was also one of the first Hollywood films to have an openly lesbian character who wasn't put there as a joke or something to be scared of. The Haunting wraps you up in suspense and becomes unbearably tense. When it finally tears away the cobwebs, it reveals both supernatural fear and the lingering threat of internal mental suffering. Given Jackson's own difficult struggle with mental illness, the story carefully weaved this more frightening evil in amongst the ghosts and moving furniture.